and thank you for joining me today in this virtual presentation. We did do some pre-recording before, I'm sorry, can I start?
That's okay, just go ahead and restart.
Okay, just keep going, okay, sorry.
It's okay.
All right, just shake it off and just be normal.
Exactly.
All right. Hello, and thank you for joining me in today's virtual workshop about effective modifications for students working below grade level in a general education placement setting. Now, as you know, we have pre-recorded our presentations this year, but I will be there with you as you're watching my presentation to address any questions that you may have in real time through the chat feature here on Zoom. So thanks for joining me. I'm going to go ahead and get started. We've got a lot to cover in a short period of time. Let me go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Elizabeth Lewis. I'm the Director of Education at the Down Syndrome Connection of the Bay Area. I want to share just a little bit more about our organization, and then we'll get right into our presentation. So the Down Syndrome Connection of the Bay Area has been around for a long time, since 1999. We provide a wide array of services and supports to individuals with Down syndrome and their families and the communities to support them. And we offer tons of different services through medical outreach, obviously educational services and supports, and then adult programs and much, much more. My area of expertise is in the education on the education side of things. So we developed the Down Syndrome Education Alliance back in 2010, and we've partnered with over 50 Bay Area schools. We provide consultation for education teams, our members and families, but also their teaching teams. And we do provide ongoing workshops for families, educators, specialists. We provide IEP support. We do a communications readiness program that we have every single summer to help promote school readiness and communication readiness for kiddos 4 through 7. We have a lending library of evidence-based materials, assistive technology, and AAC supports as well that we make available for schools. We loan them out for free to schools. We offer ability awareness presentations where we will come to your school or provide a virtual presentation about disabilities and understanding best practices and how to support your peers with disabilities. We also offer professional development trainings and much more. Now, although our area of expertise is in the learning profile of a student or someone with Down syndrome, we found that these best practices, these strategies apply to all students of all abilities, which is why we've become a premier resource for schools around the Bay Area to help them understand best practices, to help them understand how they can support their students who have significant challenges in the classroom. Not just students with Down syndrome. So that's why we're here today, although that is our area of expertise. So if you do have a student with Down syndrome and you're supporting a student with Down syndrome, then hopefully you know who we are, and you know that you can reach out to us at any time for those specific areas of need or questions you may have. So today we are talking about modifications. Our objectives of today's workshop are to gain a better understanding about meaningful inclusion, review universal design for learning, its role in helping students access learning. Now, you guys are taking a lot of different courses, and I know there are a lot of webinars about UDL, so we're not going to dive a ton into that or inclusion. This is the Inclusion Collaborative, right? So that's why we're all here. So we're just going to highlight those pieces and then get right into what we wanted to share with you, because it's been really effective with different teachers, educators, and specialists around the Bay Area when we've given this workshop before. So we're going to understand how to effectively differentiate your instruction to meet the needs of various learning profiles, discover a strengths-based approach to make effective modifications that are directly tied to your students' IEP goals. And then we're going to explore some tangible examples of modifications. So meaningful inclusion. Meaningful inclusion is welcoming, valuing, empowering, and supporting the diverse academic, social, emotional, communication, and learning of all students in shared environments and experiences for the purpose of attaining the goals of education. We want all of our students to have a meaningful experience. Students of all abilities deserve to have those barriers broken down and be able to access learning and be able to develop the skills they need to have a fulfilling and meaningful life after they leave the school environment. And that's a real world that is not segregated into grocery stores or shopping malls of different abilities. We all have to get along in the real world. So it's important that we make inclusion meaningful by really understanding best practices in order to support each student's particular learning profile, strengths, and areas of need. So an effective education team, when we're working together, because it's not just on the shoulders of one teacher, the general ed teacher, or the paraprofessional that may be supporting a student, or the special ed teacher or resource specialist. It's a team effort, and it really does take a team to be able to properly support students with significant needs and challenges in the classroom. It definitely requires taking ownership of the students' learning. It requires modeling and teaching empathy, embracing diversity, utilizing best practices and effective strategies, understanding the value of peer supports, and facilitating those social connections, utilizing different learning approaches to support varied learning profiles, integrating appropriate technology into the classroom, and engaging in collaborative planning, working together, co-teaching when possible. We're all about co-teaching here. We all learn from one another. The more we can open ourselves up to different ideas, share our ideas, brainstorm together, and stop being afraid to step out of the box, the more meaningful I think we can find the connections that we'll make with our students. So, as many of you know, Universal Design for Learning is just some great framework. It allows us to basically shake things up in the way we engage and interact and teach and learn from our own students. So, with Universal Design for Learning, teachers can create lessons and activities that incorporate the following. So, you have multiple means of representation. The information and the content are presented in various ways. So, you could do it through visual presentations, audio presentations, using tactile materials. It also means multiple means of action and expression. So in this case, students can demonstrate their understanding of the material in numerous ways. It could be in writing, or maybe if writing is not a strength, it could be spoken. It could be an artistic, like a dramatic presentation or a dance. It could be through digital presentations if there's a student who has a strong strength with, technology, assistive technology. It could be through multiple means of engagement as well. So teachers provide different ways for students to engage and remain motivated during the lesson. So multi-sensory experiences, hands-on experiences, real life experiences that really help us attach meaning to learning itself. So steps to effective differentiation. I think this is really important. This is kind of a formula that I like to use when I'm working with schools and we're creating inclusion matrices so that we can help, really maximize a student's participation and inclusion in general. We'll take a look at the schedule, we'll take a look at the classrooms, we'll take a look at the class itself and the content being presented. We take a look at the teacher and that teacher's teaching style. And so we also want to take a look at the student. You need to know your student. You need to understand his strengths, his challenges, his IEP goals, understand certain health issues and things that might impact his ability to navigate school environment. So when we think about having effective differentiation, it really means getting to know your student and his or her learning environment, gathering those facts. So you gather your facts about your student, remember to focus on the strengths. Then gather the facts about the classroom, the lessons, teaching style. And now we want to identify the mismatches in where the student is, the facts about the student, and the facts about the classroom or the lesson, the content, the teaching styles. Once we see there are mismatches, so let's say, for example, I have a student named Will, and he participates in second grade, and he's learning all of his skills, new skills related to his IEP goals, but he's not reading on the same level. His classroom is reading at a second grade level. They are starting to do more complex math assignments and reading and writing assignments. Writing is not an easy thing for Will. He's still, that's very emerging. So that's a mismatch. He's reading at more of a kindergarten level. They're teaching at second grade text. So there's a mismatch there. The teacher lectures a lot and he's a visual learner. So we see a mismatch there. Once we start identifying those mismatches, then we can start getting creative and thinking about how we can solve those mismatches, how we can fill in those gaps so that we're thinking about the facts and strengths about the learner in the classroom, and we're helping them come together in a more cohesive way. It's actually a lot of fun when you start thinking about all the different ways based on what we've just talked about with universal design for learning, knowing that it's a pretty open-ended opportunity to express, understand, and engage our knowledge, what we're learning, and how we're learning. And so when you think about it in that way, it's like there's no one size fits all approach. It's kind of like being a detective, and it's pretty fun when you have the time and the opportunity and the collaborative time, collaboration with your team to be able to come up with new and exciting ways to engage and motivate your learner based on that student's facts and his strengths, his motivators, his interests, the things he can do, so that they can tackle those areas of need and address them. So once we start thinking about those things, then we can effectively differentiate the content and the materials, the products, the assessments, and the processes of learning. So many of you have probably seen this graphic before, and it used to really represent equality versus, or equity versus equality, right? So we see equal, right, as the sameness. Everyone has access to the exact same thing. It's equal, it's static instruction, that kind of one size supposed to fit all approach, which we all know isn't the case. Well, then we have an equitable solution here in the middle, right? The tall boy didn't need a box to see the ball game, but the little guy needed 2 boxes to see it. So now we've provided the little guy with what he needs to make this an equitable experience so they can all experience the game together. But I really like the added graphic that talks about, it kind of represents UDL here, right? Which is the flexible learning experiences. They all actually now can see through the whole fence, and we've removed barriers in general, and now they have access to a broader, bigger picture. And that's what we are trying to achieve when we're thinking outside the box and we're trying to engage with learners of different abilities and different strengths and different areas of need, that flexibility you need to make the learning meaningful. One important note I believe is just so important, is make sure before you start anything, before you are making new modifications and you're all excited and you can't wait to engage with the student at school, now that you understand how to tie IEP goals to curriculum and create modifications that are appropriate, make sure your student has access to multimodal communication. If you're working with a student who has an IEP, is working below grade level, and has significant communication challenges, you need to make sure that this student can communicate in order to participate. So that's something that should be ever present for those of you who are working with students with significant communication challenges. Utilize any type of communication you can and accept and incorporate all forms of communication, whether they're gestural, whether they're verbal, you're using choice boards, an AAC device, etc., etc. These are all important ways to communicate, and we want to make sure that our students know that we want them to be heard and that we are listening and that we accept all the ways they can communicate. It's for a whole child communication. We also want to model and encourage the use of the student's main mode of communication. So if you are a teacher working with a student who utilizes AAC devices or low tech or PECs, visual schedules and communication tools, etc., make sure that you're taking the time to learn about those things. Make sure you're taking the time to understand how to use them, consult with the speech therapist or the AAC specialist so that you know how to interact and engage with your student, and that we're not allowing the communication challenges to be a barrier with that student accessing learning. So we're focusing today on modifications. Now, we talk a lot about accommodations and modifications. And in fact, we have a 2.5-hour workshop that's all about accommodations and modifications. But today we've got to scrunch things into a 45-minute presentation. And so we really want to focus specifically on modifications. That's been something that a lot of teachers, a lot of gen ed teachers have come to us with a lot of questions and challenges, and they're not quite sure how to appropriately modify for their students who are working below grade level. So we wanted to focus in on specifically on modifications today. And we're going to give you some great examples, but let's just take a look over, kind of the basics when it comes to modifications. So unlike accommodations, which are just changing the how, right? A student is able to access the exact same content all of his peers are accessing in the classroom, right? So a pair of glasses in order, or preferential seating in order to access or see the same content on the chalkboard that all the other kids are accessing. That's an accommodation, right? But modification actually changes the what of learning. So a student with modifications may have different content, completely different delivery, may have a different looking product, and then the processes of obtaining and learning the knowledge, gathering the information, and then expressing that knowledge, the process can be very different as well. So that's something that's important. A lot of times teachers, general ed teachers that I talk with and consult with are concerned about keeping their kiddos up to grade level standards. But if you have a student who's working below grade level with significant challenges and has an IEP, then until their transition in their freshman year, which parents will decide if they're on diploma track, these students can be working on a completely different content. And so it's important to remember that. This changes the what. So you can get really creative with the type of content that you provide, and making sure that you're making these modifications that are really aligned to IEP goals. So the student is not held to grade level standards in this case when you're making modifications. And so they're appropriate for students with IEPs, right? Not 504, because they are accessing all of the same material and are being held to grade level standards. Students with IEPs may not be working at grade level, and that's okay. So one important thing to help make the curriculum achievable through modifications is to make sure that we are working with a strengths-based approach. So modifications do make the curriculum more achievable. It provides those connectors, those ties to the curriculum, but we are really customizing it and individualizing it for that student specifically, that student's abilities, areas of need, and custom tailored goals that we've created. So it involves a combinations of altered content, conceptual difficulty, educational goals, and instructional methods. So that's all the what, right? That we can do to make these modifications. And then we want to really focus on strengths based. I've heard a lot of teachers who I can understand are completely frustrated when they are maybe they don't have the experience in working with a student that's learning at a significantly lower level than the other typically developing peers in the classroom. And I hear a lot of, I mean, he can't read at a third grade level. He can't even add and subtract 2 digits, and we're working on adding and subtracting up to 10, or skip counting, et cetera, et cetera. But I hear a lot of can'ts, and I think the best way to go in this is with the can attitude, right? So let's focus on the things that a student can do. And I want to just kind of give you some examples, right? So if someone says, well, he can't write, so how is he going to be able to do this activity? Well, what can he do? Oh, he can type. He can use tiles or assistive technology, or he can copy things. He may not be able to write it all out. Maybe he can copy some letters or segments. He can dictate, say it's an expressive writing activity, he can dictate what needs to be written out. He can highlight or circle certain words from a word bank or put them together. Can't speak. Okay, well, um, uh, a lack of expressive communication or emerging expressive communication should never keep a student from being able to participate alongside typically developing peers in a classroom. You just have to figure out how to help that child communicate. So if he can't speak verbally, well, what can he do? Can use signs or gestures. He's a pro with PECs and using his visual aids to be able to express his understanding and knowledge or make choices. Or maybe he has a light tech or high tech AAC device that helps him communicate. He can't read. Well, he can listen to a peer read. He can listen to an audio book or understand visuals. He can't add or subtract or multiply or divide. Well, he can use manipulatives, and he can use a calculator. So we start to look, when we were talking about those mismatches earlier, right? This is kind of the foundation for that formula, really focusing on the cans. He can't learn all of it. It's too much, too over his head. Well, he can learn big ideas and key vocabulary. And, we want to hold our students, all of our students, even our students who are learning below grade level and have IEPs, or may have significant cognitive challenges, processing challenges, or communication, expressive or receptive challenges. That's okay. We want to hold them to high expectations and really focus on those cans. And so we're going to go into some fun examples with that in just a little bit. So here's some examples that we're providing you that we've created for actual students who are participating in Gen Ed classroom settings that have been effective. And then we're just giving you some different ideas about different ways that you can adapt, modify through every subject across lots of different thematic units, etc. So let's start with reading. So with reading adaptions, you can use comprehension worksheets. You can highlight the answers in the text and use a color code to each question. So that's a great way for good visual learners to be able to help them identify the piece of the text instead of having, 10 paragraphs in front of their eyes that are hard to kind of sort through and pull from. So just simplifying the text or making it visually, I guess, more appealing and understandable with the color coding is a great way to adapt comprehension exercises. Using a graphic organizer or a topic board, searching for adapted books online. There are tons of those. Readworks.org is a great place to find lower level reading passages with comprehension questions related to the theme or the topic. So this is a really great resource if you are teaching, sixth graders and there's a whole lot involved in, let's say you're learning Shakespeare, right? You're reading Macbeth in seventh or eighth grade. And there are students that have to write long passages, essays, answer complex questions, etc. Well, you can create a modified version of that with some of just the key points. And here's an example here. So with this Macbeth, we're matching the character to the description. So for this particular reading or comprehension exercise based on the student's IEP goal, it was being able to connect to characters and comprehending and understanding and showing that which characters related to the description. And that's tied to an IEP goal while also working on the same content and what's being offered in the curriculum. So with writing adaptations, using markers instead of a pencil or a crayon, offering those choices. Sometimes markers provide a little bit better feedback. It's bolder. It can write in different, size fonts, making sure that we're flexible with what they're producing, making sure that the writing is that we're flexible with how they're expressing through handwriting, and that we're relating this to an OT goal, not an academic goal, in the sense that, a lot of there are some kiddos that have, or students that have low muscle tone, may have more difficulty with fine motor work. So we just want to make sure that we're flexible in understanding the difference between what may be an OT goal related to a disability or fine motor challenge versus a writing, like an educational writing goal. So different ways that we can help our kiddos who may have a little more difficulty with writing, using markers instead of pencil crayon, utilizing a slant board, tracing over a highlighter, providing boundaries to write in, dictating to a scribe. So if it is let's say an expressive writing, exercise and handwriting and fine motor work is still a big challenge, then we can think outside the box and allow that student to dictate and someone can scribe the thoughts and ideas, providing a word bank so that the student can choose from the word bank and then be able to put those words together to express his ideas or thoughts or answers, using sentence strips or an app like Clicker Sentences or Clicker Connect. Those apps are great for our students who utilize AT in the classroom. And then just making sure that we're keeping the primary goal in mind, right? Is it handwriting? Is it spelling? Or is it composing? We want to make sure that whatever the goal is, that we're not creating too many demands. We want to focus on that specific goal. So for example, if it's composing, again, if it's expressive or creative writing, then asking a student who may have a lot of challenges, fine motor challenges, to write long essays may not be appropriate at that time. That may be more demand than what we need to put on that student, because actually the primary goal is to get his expressive ideas, thoughts out. So if we need to use other ways for him to be able to do that, that's okay. If it's a spelling goal, we may, and we'll go into more spelling goals, but again, you may use multiple choice, you may just be focusing on one letter, you may be able to have different letters on word tiles that you can put together so that you're not having to work that handwriting. So it's just important to keep those primary goals in mind. And writing is one of those that gets a little bit confusing. And so that's why I wanted to kind of highlight the differences between handwriting activity, a spelling activity, or actually composing thoughts and ideas in expressive writing. And here we've got just a little video of my friend Liam, who is using a clicker app in order to express his thoughts and ideas about a book he read. So this is a great example of a modification, a differentiated way for Liam to be able to participate in the lesson. Let's push play here.
Yeah, what movie did we see yesterday? Peter Rabbit. And what was your favorite part of Peter Rabbit? Like the ant, the tree fell in painting house. The tree fell on the painting house? Yeah, the house where she did her paintings. Okay, the tree fell on the painting house. Let's see if I can add a picture of a tree. Okay, what do you say? Okay, let's show everyone what your iPad looks like. All right, Liam. Okay, let's listen to the sentence.
The tree fell on the painting house.
Okay, let me type it. What the? Type it. Here, the tree fell. Look at the next word. Mm-hmm. And what goes at the end of a sentence?
The tree fell on the painting house.
Wow, Liam, nice job. Do you want to add the picture?
No.
No? Okay.
So that's a great example of using a word bank, using technology, being able to have Liam express his ideas in his own words, but not have to write them down and not have to complete the activity in the exact same ways that his peers are. He's a visual learner, seeing that word bank, seeing the sentence in front of him and being able to match the words in the same sequential order as he saw in the sentence. And then the satisfaction of hearing his sentence that he created being read aloud to him with that nice visual reinforcement as well. It's a great way to give our kiddos, our students with significant disabilities or communication challenges, an opportunity to participate just like their peers. So spelling adaptations, sorry about that. Spelling adaptations, this is an example of a worksheet where students just working on those initial letter sounds. And so you may be in a classroom or your students in a classroom where the rest of the class is learning, 20 spelling words that your student with the IEP who's working below grade level may not be able to read just yet, right? They may be working, if we think about the facts about the student, right? You go back to that. Oh, well, my friend Liam is actually has 50 sight words under his belt and is working on initial letter sounds, whereas the rest of the class may be working on far more complex, 20 new words a week, spelling words, and they have to produce that every single week. Well, obviously there's a mismatch there. And so what we can do is we can modify that. So maybe the spelling words are still the same, but we're missing that beginning letter sound because that is the goal for Liam. And so he can take a look at those words, and maybe we don't use 20. We can adjust the amount. We can always adjust the what, the content. So maybe he's only working on 5 or 10 words, and those words only have the first letter, missing. And we, an aide or the teacher can call out the word, and then he has to identify that letter sound and write in the letter sound. Or maybe he uses a label, just like you see in this example, where he can just stick on the letter sound if writing is a challenge. So for some spelling adaptations, we can build words with magnetic letters or letter tiles. You can fill in the missing letter, first, last, vowel, etc. Maybe you're working on middle vowel sounds, and that's the thing that you're wanting to identify if that's an IEP goal. You could circle the correctly spelled word. And so, multiple choice, give to a field of 2 choices and have the student circle which one is spelled correctly. You can definitely shorten the spelling list, as I mentioned before, and you could utilize an alternate spelling list that is related to the IEP goals. So again, we're always trying to think about how to tie in to the IEP goals. But if you can make the content look the same as the rest of the students in class, but only modify, based on those goals. So like with my letter example, or like you see here in our worksheet example, then the student feels like he or she is attending the same or similar kind of work as his peers and participating alongside his peers, but again participating at a level that's not presenting him with too many demands, that's appropriate, and that's tied and associated to his individual goals. With science and social studies adaptations, basically, when it comes to, especially as gaps start to widen, as students get older and older, students with significant challenges, cognitive learning challenges, may not learn everything the other students are learning about the topic, but that's okay. They will learn something. So we just want to focus on main ideas and key vocabulary. You want to make sure that the assessments do reflect the students' learning goals. You want to make sure you're not failing a student, right? Because he's not doing the same work as the other kiddos. So make sure you're grading based on, or you're assessing based on those specific learning goals. Look for hands-on multisensory opportunities to make learning more meaningful. Use graphic organizers, visuals, word banks, simple sentences. These are things that really just give more explicit expectations and simplify the process of being able to kind of digest the information that they're taking in, process that, and then be able to give you meaningful output or meaningful expression of their knowledge. You can do things like use blank sticky labels, side-by-side modeling. If your student has a one-on-one aid, you can have replica or a peer, even better if there's a peer who's working on something, and the student next to the peer can work on, that student can model and the peer can imitate. We're still taking in something, we're still learning something, right? What can they do? What can they do? That's what we want to keep focusing on. We can break tasks down one step at a time. That's very important. Short, explicit instructions. And don't forget about helpful resources like Teachers Pay Teachers, YouTube videos, Pinterest. There are so many things that have already been created, tons of ideas. So I know, for a lot of you, you're busy teachers managing a classroom of multiple students with multiple needs. And, it seems a little easier said than done, right? To be able to just customize a plan for every single student. So lean on the resources that are already out there. There are tons of great ideas. The point of this, more than anything, is about opening your mind up to the possibilities. And once you do that, you'll find that it starts to feel more natural. The whole modifications process, when you're looking at that strengths-based approach and the mismatches with the learner in the classroom, you start to realize that making these modifications, they kind of have a formula. Once you really understand that student, the modifications become easier and easier. Here are just a few examples of science and social studies modifications where we're just simplifying things. We're looking at key ideas. We're looking at main content. To the left, we've got coloring and labeling, where the rest of the class may have more definitions involved. They may have, sentences they have to write about each thing they're identifying on the plant. Whereas here, we're just looking at key vocabulary and main ideas for this particular learner based on his goals. Same with the ancient Egypt study guide here in the middle. We've got pictures and key words, and the student was just where all the other students are, again, writing about main ideas and identifying different aspects about ancient Egypt, and are probably answering questions in multiple choice and essay format. For this particular student, we're getting those key ideas as well as visual pictures, because the student's a visual learner, and we're just having him draw a line from the word to the picture that matches. So we're at least establishing those main ideas, that key content. And then here on the right is an example of the side-by-side, the modeling, where an aide or a student peer could work on something, a worksheet. And here it's identifying different parts of the body and bones, but it's tied to a letter goal. So the student is still doing the same work as the other kids. It looks similar, except he's more focused on understanding and identifying the initial letter of each of the terms that are listed on the worksheet, because that's tied to his goals. Here are some simplified ways to work with your student and provide quizzes and assess the knowledge. We've just broken it down into really simple key topics. Edhelper.com is an awesome resource for being able to get this type of material. The simple quizzes with the visual supports underneath that really help give students a really clear picture of what we're asking. So graphic organizers and these simple quizzes are a great way to assess your students' understanding. And then with math modifications, math is a tricky concept. So getting into as many hands-on experiences as possible, using manipulatives, number lines, hundreds charts, introduce a calculator. Your student can use a calculator if he is working below grade level. And a calculator is a great modification. I know I use a calculator these days wherever I go as an adult. So it's also a great skill to have for students who are going to be navigating the real world around them. So don't be afraid of using a calculator. And it's really important to reduce those cognitive demands. So if we're solving a math problem, maybe the student doesn't need to be writing out the math problem. They can use the sticky labels, right? Or the manipulatives to show you what they understand, or verbalize their answer, whatever works for them. In this example, I'm working with an evidence-based math approach called Numicon, which is amazing. If you haven't heard of it or explored it, please do. It is a great visual way of understanding what the learner is thinking. You're watching that learner try to problem solve right in front of you, and it's just visually appealing. And it's based on the 10 frame. So it's just an approach, a manipulative, not a concept. But here you can see in this example, I have a friend a student who loves to, play ball. He's gross motor skills are awesome. Fine motor skills are still emerging. And so we play number bowling. His IEP goal is to add up 2 numbers up to 10. So he takes 2 rolls, and whichever 2 numbers he knocks down, he adds those up. And that's a way of us working on his IEP goal while just shaking things up and thinking outside the box about his strengths and how I can best keep him motivated and engaged. So finally, we're here at the end of our presentation, and I hope I didn't go too fast and that I got in the content and it was meaningful for you because, you know, this is such an important thing for all of us to remember, is that, you know, we want to include kiddos of all abilities, students of all abilities. I have to remember, I always say kiddos, students of all abilities in as much as possible in the general education setting. And in order to support that meaningful inclusion, we need to understand how we can think outside the box, how we can be more flexible, and how we can connect with our students in ways that are meaningful for them, which just makes us all better educators at the end of the day. So just remember, if you are a general ed teacher and you're working with a student who's not working at grade level, if he has an IEP and is working below grade level and requires modification, it's not your job to bring that student up to grade level standards. It's your job to tie his IEP goals to what he's learning in class in the most meaningful ways, to break down those barriers and give him access to learning. Make sure you use curriculum connectors to align the goals with your Common Core standards. And also, we're here to help. So our organization, again, we do specialize in the learning profile of students with Down syndrome, but we've got a lot of great resources on our website, everything from a low-tech communications library to where we can customize communication like PECS visuals for teachers and their students. We also have a ton of workshops and webinars that are recorded and are up on our website that have to do with accommodations and modifications, behavior, communication, you name it, and it's up there. We also offer free consult. We offer free consult trainings, workshops, ability awareness presentations at your school, and lots of helpful information on there. So definitely check us out at dscba.org. We appreciate your time. Thank you for joining me today, and I hope that everyone has a great conference. Thanks so much.